Hello friends, Matt Wilson here with another video. This is about the Yardbirds and Jeff Beck solo in the 70s. I'm going to do this poster first because I have actually brought posters out before for these videos that I did not hang on the wall and I forgot to show them to you. So anyways, this is, let me pull this a little closer. That's the Yardbirds in 1968 with Jimmy Page playing in San Francisco. And it's not an expensive poster. It's actually kind of cool. Wish I had one with Jeff Beck, but you know, that's okay. I'll take Jimmy. Oh, and I'm wearing this shirt too. I've got several Yardbirds shirts and a Jeff Beck shirt too, but this was the cleanest one. So, all right, let me get the, okay, it's adjusted somewhat. Okay, let's talk about the Yardbirds. I'm doing a lot of British invasion bands, if you've noticed, because you know, when I was a kid growing up, that's what really affected me. I can hear you wondering why I haven't done a Beatles show yet. I will. I'm have to be like in the zone to do something like that, and that's a big topic. You know, I haven't done a Dylan show or a Elvis Presley show, or you know. So, anyways, today's the Yardbirds and Jeff Beck solo, but just in the 70s. We're gonna start with 5 Live Yardbirds. This is the only album that Eric Clapton recorded with the band. He was a teenager. He was 19 years old. Well, he turned 19 in 64 on March 30th, and I know that because that's my birthday as well. So I don't know when this was recorded, but it's possible. He could have been 18, but he was probably 19. I think every note that Eric Clapton ever recorded with the Yardbirds was when he was a teenager. Because I think by March 30th of 65, the day I was born, he was already out the band. So this is a good record. It's not recorded well. I have said on other shows that this is the best live British Invasion era band LP, and I'm going to stick with that. The performances are smoking hot with the ultimate version of Smokestack Lightning. It's just cover versions, all of which I have the originals of. I'm not going to say the Yardbirds do these songs better, but I think I once read that Howlin' Wolf was impressed with their version of Smokestack Lightning, so, you know, no greater praise. It's a typical, this has bonus tracks. It's a typical British Invasion era album from the mid-60s in that it's mostly just covers. In fact, I think it's all covers of African-American material. But they, you know, they put their stamp on them, and the performances are real good. All right. For Your Love was an American compilation, I guess you could say, of, I think it's half Clapton and half Jeff Beck tracks. You see Jeff there sitting by the piano, which he does not play. This album is almost never discussed in terms of great 60s records, but it is. I mean, listen to this. For Your Love, that's the classic pop hit that they had that made Clapton want to go, you know, do something else that was more authentic. That's a great song. Now, true, he's not doing much on that number, but just going dun 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 in the middle part, because it's a harpsichord that's playing the riff. But that was worth quitting the band over. I'm Not Talking, great. Putty in Your Hands is just like, you know, their version of Money, the Barrett Strong Motown number. I Ain't Got You, love that one. Got to Hurry is one of those B-sides that's instrumental. I Ain't Done Wrong, that's one of their great performances. It's classic Jeff Beck. I Wish You Would has a smoke and break from a young Eric. A Certain Girl is like a pop song. I mean, it's really, really good. It's as good as the Stones album from '65, probably. I mean, I would say. But even better that same year, is having a rave up with the Yardbirds. Now, when this originally appeared, this is another U.S. compilation, by the way, and I say compilation because when it originally appeared on LP, side 2 was just songs from 5 Live Yardbirds, which I don't think had an official release in the States. You can only get it here as an import, and how many kids in 65 were doing that? So side 2 was all stuff from 5 Live Yardbirds, but side 1 was all new Jeff Beck material, which had been, I think, out on 45 already. But listen to these songs: "You're a Better Man Than I," "Evil-Hearted You," "I'm a Man," which I could do a whole show on "I'm a Man," "Still I'm Sad," "Heart Full of Soul," and "Train Kept a Rollin'." I mean, I think that's side 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because on this CD, they put lots of other stuff on from 65 as well. I mean, there's Steel Blues, Shapes of Things. Well, that Shapes of Things is from 66. And so is Stroll On. I'm going to say side 1 of the original LP of having a rave up is the best single side of any Yardbirds album, unless you're talking about their greatest hits album in 67. So this was essential. It's one of those classic examples of an album which you need to have just for one LP side, like Love's Da Capo would be another great example of this. So great Jeff Beck performance. And since their discography is small, I guess I should talk about some of these songs. I thought that I could do a whole show on "I'm a Man." "I'm a Man," that was, I'm doing this off the top of my head now. That uses that da-na-na-na riff, which you know what, folks? I wish I knew exactly where that riff comes from, but for the purposes of this little brief talk I'm about to give you, I'm going to say that's from the early 50s. It's from Muddy Waters' Hoochie Coochie Man. Right? Yeah. And then Bo Diddley used it for his "I'm a Man," because he wrote the song. Muddy Waters heard that because they were both on the Chess label. He came up with "Mannish Boy," like he's one-upping Bo, because Bo had used his riff from Hoochie Coochie Man. "Mannish Boy" is another classic blues number, right? And I think those were the 3 definitive versions using that riff in the 50s. Then the Yardbirds did "I'm a Man" using the na-na-na-na, but it was just na-na-na-na, speeded up. And they also Beck utilized in that song, the rave up. Now, the rave up is when they start to play the song really faster and faster, and then it reaches like a crescendo and then stops. Clapton had done the same thing on the 5 Live Yardbirds album. In fact, "I'm a Man" is on here. So Beck wasn't even the first Yardbirds guitar player to play this. But, the Who covered "I'm a Man" that same year on the My Generation album, not as good. Later on, David Bowie kind of had a Yardbirds pastiche with Jean Genie, which even had a bit of a rave up. The Count 5 did on Psychotic Reaction the rave up, where they play it really fast, and then also the solo in Psychotic Reaction is kind of like a takeoff on what Jeff Beck was doing with the strings on the "I'm a Man" solo. So anyways, I don't want to get off on a tangent. This is a great compilation, and it's even better on CD because it doesn't give you any things from 5 Live Yardbirds. You need that album anyway. It gives you other 1965 recordings and then some. Okay, the second UK album was called the Yardbirds, or in the US it was called Over, Under, Sideways, Down. That's the version I had growing up. And to further complicate matters, it's also called Roger the Engineer, but it's all the same album. It's called the Yardbirds. This is the mono and the stereo mix. I like all my Yardbirds in mono, by the way. This is often considered their best album because it's the only, their only LP before this was the live one with Clapton, which had no original material on it. So this is pretty much all you have until the Jimmy Page album, Little Game, which I'll get to in a second. So these songs are almost uniformly good. Lost Women, Over and Sideways Down, which is a classic. The Nazar Blue, that's a kind of a Beck showcase. I Can't Make Your Way is a pop song. Rack My Mind's all right. Farewell. Hot House of Montgomery shit is like an instrumental with yeah, 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 yeah. Jeff's Boogie is just a takeoff on Chuck Berry's Chuck's Boogie. He's Always There is that's a cool one. Turn Into Earth is almost like an answer song to Still I'm Sad. What Do You Want? And Ever Since the World Began. Good stuff. Good stuff. Also, this album, has vestiges of psychedelia, and it was released 1 week before the Byrds' Fifth Dimension. Now, Fifth Dimension is the album I usually point to as the first psychedelic album, where there's enough songs on there to say that's a psychedelic album. This was released a week before, but I don't think there's enough psych songs on here to really qualify this. But if you're anti-Byrds and pro-Yardbirds, then you can point to this as the first psychedelic album, by a rock band. Anyways. All right, plus if you get this mono stereo disc, you get the classic Happenings 10 Years Time Ago 45 with Psycho Daisies on the B-side. That's when Jimmy Page comes in, and they're both playing on that number. All right? If you're only going to get one Yardbirds album, it's not a compilation. It may as well be this one. All right. Okay. After that, Beck is out. Jimmy is in. We get Little Games, which is it's a mixed bag. It's like a potpourri of stuff that is pretty good and is, like a sop to Mickey Most, their producer, to make a pop song. Page with the Yardbirds always did fascinate me, and look at the poster I got. I couldn't get this album for a long time growing up, so it was kind of like a holy grail. But now that it's easily available on CD, this is the mono mix again, which I prefer to the stereo. So to go over this really quickly, Little Games is a great song with a great Jimmy Page riff, which almost sounds Zeppelin-esque. John Paul Jones, I think, is doing the strings on there. Smile on Me, which is just another takeoff on one of those. I think it's a Helen Wolf number, whose name escapes me right now. White Summer is, that's what Jimmy would do with Led Zeppelin with Black Mountainside on the first Zeppelin LP, but it's not an original. He got this from Burt Jansch, I think. It's not, Page didn't write this music. Glimpses is not bad. No Excess Baggage is just a pop song. Only the Black Rose is pretty cool. And then Puzzles, which was a B-side, that's a bonus track on here. That's better than half of the songs on the album. So, get it to complete the collection. I'll tell you what should be on here is Think About It, because that was a B-side in '68, which is that's one of the best things that they ever recorded. But I'll get to that in a second too, because I'm going to talk about the 2-disc compilation. Okay, this is something I got a while back. I don't know that it's really essential. This is Little Games and More. Yeah, it's a 2-disc examination of the sessions which produced Little Games. Nothing really essential, but if you're a Yardbirds nut like me, it's worth owning. There's lots of posthumous Yardbirds releases that I have not really, of quasi-legality, which I have not really dipped my feet into. Here's one that someone sent me, Cumular Limit, which is just a CDR, It's like, but it's interesting, but it's, again, not essential. What I did like, though, which came out a few years ago, this Yardbirds '68 release. Let me give you a little bit of history of that. Was it 2 discs? No, or 1 disc? And a booklet. In 1971, they had a live Yardbirds album released, which Jimmy Page did not like. It had fake crowd noise added in, and it was of dubious sound quality. So, well, Page sued to have the album removed from the shelves, and it was making collector's album. It doesn't sound that good. So what he did was he went back in a few years back and he messed with the tapes and took out all the fake crowd noise. And I'm sure Pro Tooled everything so that he sounds good. But it's a good album. You get on here their version of Dazed and Confused, which they just pretty much stole lock, stock, and barrel from what was that guy? Not Bird Jams. I can't think of his name, but look it up. And he said Page could basically have that riff, and then they went and recorded it with different lyrics with Led Zeppelin. It's all pretty good, and it sounds okay, since Jimmy fixed the sound. So if you want live Yardbirds with Jimmy Page, that's what you get. The only thing that I could not find today, because this wouldn't be a show, right? Not a Matt Wilson show, if I couldn't find something, was the Yardbirds BBC sessions, which just came out this year. It's multi-discs. I can't remember whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 discs, but it's pretty good. Some of the recordings, you get a lot of the same songs multiple times in multiple versions. Some of the sound quality is pretty much abysmal, but kudos to them for finding all those tapes. And I had a good time listening to it. It's not as good as the Pretty Things BBC sessions that I showed you a week or two ago with my Pretty Things video. That's a really good multi-disc BBC sessions, but it's about as good as you're going to get for the Yardbirds. And if delving into their, somewhat slight discography is daunting for you, this came out a long time ago. That little thing, it's just a sticker. It's 2 disc Rhino, it's got that loud sound, but I don't mind it. It gives you 90% of what you need on here, including, you get parts of 5 Live Yardbirds. Let's see if there's any songs I've not mentioned yet. Heartful of Soul was on their 3rd album. New York City Blues was on the Yardbirds Greatest Hits record, which I owned growing up. Bought that in New Orleans. Some weird Italian stuff. I mentioned Think About It, which is also on here. That was a B-side that they did in '68, and it's great. The riff goes. Aerosmith covered that actually in '79 on their A Night in the Ruts album, a respectable version. But anyways, this gives you pretty much everything you need. There's even some Keith Relf solo stuff at the end there. So that about does it for the Yardbirds. So you had Clapton, Beck, and Page. I think virtually anyone will tell you that the Jeff Beck years were the most productive and produced in terms of quality, the most, the most quantity of great Yardbird songs come from the Beck era. So let's talk about Jeff Beck. This is Truth. This is my only copy of Truth. You know what? I've got another version of Truth somewhere, but this is the audio fidelity version. It's a hella great record. 1968. He's got Rod Stewart singing with him, and everyone loves this album. It's people say it's like a blueprint for Led Zeppelin, but I don't know how I feel about that. A lot of bands in England were doing, a lot of guitar, rocking up the blues at that time. I don't think that Led Zeppelin sounds too much like the Jeff Beck group. I mean, they did do that same number. What is it? You Shook Me. Jeff and Rod trade off guitar vocals in much the same way that Jimmy and Robert do the next year on the Zeppelin version. But other than that, there's not, I don't know. I don't think Jimmy stole anything from Jeff Beck, in other words. But love this record, one of the highlights of 1968. And if you just want to hear Beck in a hard rock context, this is the one to get. Almost as good, not quite, is Beck-Ola from '69. This is a very short record. I think it's less than a half an hour. It's the same lineup, I think. Maybe Nicky Hopkins is on here as Truth. Also Beck in a very hard rock context. By this point, though, you did have Led Zeppelin on the scene. So, I'm not going to say that this album is as good or anywhere near as good as the first two Zeppelin records. But that's, Jimmy Page, he had it very lucky. He found the perfect band for him. And Jimmy was a songwriter too. I mean, writing music more than Jeff Beck was. He could produce the stuff. So the Jeff Beck group was never going to be. Plus, Beck is kind of hard to get along with. So I do think these are really good records, though. And if you haven't checked them out, do so, please. But he's pretty much done, though, with his hard rock phase as the 60s, and so does Beck, the hard rocker. Here's a CDR I have of the mono version of Truth. I don't know if Truth is available on CD in mono. It might be. He gets in a car accident, a motorcycle accident. I think it's a car accident. And he's kind of laid up in 1970. We get Rough and Ready in 71. Now, this is beginning to be his move into jazz fusion. These are all different players than the original Jeff Beck group in the 60s. This is more fusion-y. Jeff doesn't sing. Well, that was the thing. He did sing some of that material in the 60s. He sang the singles like Hi-Ho, Silver Lining, which was a hit in England, or Tally Man. But on the records, the albums, I should say, he didn't sing. Well, when you got Rod Stewart to sing, why would you need, So here he has other people coming in. I never think that he got another top-notch singer after Rod Stewart. In fact, eventually he just kind of abandoned singers in general. Right? This is a good record. He's really playing well. In fact, here's a quad mix of it, which I recommend. I like all my surround sound discs that I have with Jeff Beck. I don't have everything, but this would be my preferred way to hear it. I like everything on here. You're not going to hear any of this stuff on the radio. Got the Feeling, Situation, Max's Tune. I like all this stuff. New Ways and Train is great. Jody's a Ballad. It's all good. I think much the same band did this one. This is an audio fidelity version of the Jeff Beck group from 1972. It is another quad mix. I like it. Is it better than the Jeff Beck group? I'm going to say no. I think I would prefer the Jeff Beck group from 71 just a bit over this album Rough and Ready from 71, just a bit more than this one from 72. But both of them are good, and I think it's the same singer. So if you like that kind of fusion-y but still rockin' aspect, he hasn't fully taken the deep dive into fusion yet, then these two albums would be for you. All right? So again, audio fidelity quad mix. Okay, in 73, he had a brief sojourn with the rhythm section of Vanilla Fudge. I should do a Vanilla Fudge show too, but they're I'm a fan of Vanilla Fudge, but when I was to ask oneself if they're really that good, they sounded good, but they couldn't write material. Not great material anyway. But, Carmen, Apice, however you say his name, I've heard people on video ask him, and he says it doesn't matter. He's Italian, so I would think it would be Apice, but whatever. And Tim Bogert, you would think that rhythm section with Beck returning to hard rock briefly would be smoking, but again, these guys can't write. Beck, it can't come up with a lot of great material. So that's the issue. I like the album. I like the way it sounds, and they were really good live. I'll tell you, this just came out not that long ago. This is Live in Japan in 73 and then Live in London in 74. The Live in Japan album was released at that time. The Live in London album was not. This, probably better than the actual album. I mean, yeah, they could get up on there and just crank out those hard rock tunes. one wishes the songs were better, but if you just want to hear Jeff play in that style, and some people think that's the hard rock is the only aspect of his playing that they like, pick this up. It's not expensive. All right? So Beck, Bogert, and a Piece, or a PJ, one studio album and those 2 live albums. Okay, after that, Beck all but dispenses with vocalists, at least for a while. And we're only doing the 70s here, so not that many albums to go. This is an old Sony Master Sound gold disc of Blow by Blow. I love this record. To me, this album is as good as Truth, only it's in a completely different style. This is full-on fusion. Now, I know, if you're into jazz fusion or jazz, it's a big field. And when he's making music like this, now he's being compared to John McLaughlin or, other guys that can really play. So he's not playing a lot of fast stuff here, but it's very atmospheric. I love his tone. Here's the quad mix of that. Is the quad mix or the 5.1 mix? Anyway, it's a surround sound mix. I love every song on here. He's got George Martin, from the Beatles producing this. No vocals. He's got the voice box on here on some of the material which Frampton would popularize the next year on his live album. Cannot recommend this enough. He also did this one, Wired, which is as good to me as Blow by Blow. I think Blow by Blow might have the slightly better reputation, but I think I played this in my life just as much as I played Blow. It's another one he did with George Martin. It's another fusion album. It's just great. You can't imagine Eric Clapton or Jimmy Page ever doing something like this. Not as good anyway. Beck could effortlessly move from rock to fusion in a way that I can't think of another guitar player who could do this. Not this well. All right. There's also a surround mix of this, but I don't have it. I want to say 77. This is another live album. What's the exact title? This Jeff Beck with the Jan Hammer Group Live. I also dig it. I definitely have played this in my life more than I've played the live Beck, Bogert, and a Piece stuff, because I'd never owned the live album from that trio until this box came out this year, but I've had this for a while. I remember this in the 70s actually, but I didn't own it. So yeah, great live versions. Jan was the keyboard player. And nothing from our hero in 78 and 79, so I should stop. But since it's only 1 year outside of this is 1980, it's there and back. I'm gonna take the Obi out so you can see the cover. Well, I'll just take out the cover. It's good. Not as good probably as any of his 70s albums, but I like it. So after that, he only did 2 more albums in the 80s, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's outside the context of this show. So there you have it. Nice time. It's not even a half hour yet. The Yardbirds, one of the seminal groups of the 60s, British, American, makes no difference. Just a feast if you're a guitar fan. The Yardbirds and the John Mayall Blues Breakers, group, because he played with Clapton and then Peter Green and then Mick Taylor. It's the same thing. That's the closest thing that I can come up with to compare to the Yardbirds in terms of having 3 great guitar players who did that kind of work. And then Jeff Beck, whom was fairly popular in the 70s, not so much on the radio. I mean, the only Jeff Beck song I think I've ever heard from this era on the radio is I Ain't Superstitious, which I've heard a number of times, and that's been in a Scorsese film too, right? But those albums all sold. I mean, people talked about Jeff Beck. He was a he was respected then, and he's respected. I saw him before he passed. I saw him in 2019 with Rod Stewart here in LA. Rod brought him out for a little brief 15, 20 minute, couldn't be more than that, section of his concert where they did material from the 60s. So, and I heard that they were not getting along backstage. So I've seen Rod Stewart more than once, but that was the only time I ever saw Jeff Beck. So I'm happy for that. So folks, leave some comments, please. You know, I don't ask that you subscribe, but I ask that you leave comments, and it's getting harder and harder to get you guys to say anything. I think I might do a Clapton show coming up, because why not just get both those guys at least in the 60s anyway, for Eric. Peace out.